Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about bouncing. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how is it that people can bounce from job to job using all different kinds of technologies? Do you think that they learn before applying or are they just learning on the job? Both. I will say both. So usually what I say is that today it is practically impossible to find a person who knows exactly the stack that you are using. Well, it's not impossible depending on how mainstream your stack is. It's actually one of the biggest tips that I give to my coworkers and managers and so forth these days. And I have said this for a few years as well. Like, as a rule, it is better for an organization to bet on the most boring, obvious, mainstream thing than anything else. Unless you're like really going for being trendy and you want to recruit people who just want to play around with a lot of cool tools. The reason why I say that is because usually the problem isn't that you can't find a stack that is going to do the job. Like most of the technologies out there, especially if we're talking front end or something like that, and in many cases it's the same in back end. Like you might have differences and flavors of things and so forth, and of course different languages matter more. So in front end it's easier to find people than it is in back end, depending on your language choices. So those choices you should ideally, unless you have a really good reason, and I always tell my teams that as well, and all the people that I coach and so forth, be a responsible professional as a software developer. Think about the technologies that you're investing in. Don't add stuff that you don't strictly need, and don't add things that might make it hard for other people to join the company or join a team. I had that conversation actually just 2 days ago with one of my juniors who was taking one of the courses that I'm doing for my current employer, and we were talking about the choices he was making, and he's paired up with one of those opinionated, bitter old seniors who knows their best about absolutely everything. And it's not me in this case. Anywho, this guy had more or less forced his will upon the team, and so I told my junior, just so you know, if you feel the least bit like this might be a hard thing for you to learn, tell me, and I will make that guy stop doing what he's doing. Because I'm fortunate in this regard that I outrank him, which means that he's going to have to listen to me. Of course, I would never force people to do anything, but I would be able to. As I said to my junior, you might feel uncomfortable having a conversation about choices and stuff like that because you default to thinking that because he's the senior, he is right. And in this situation, I told him very, very clearly, it is more important to me that you are productive than that he gets to play with his new toy. Because I know that that senior will be able to do the job with a boring, obvious setup. But I'm not sure if you will be able to do the job if he gets his way. And that is something that is very important in order for you to mature as a professional, as a software developer, a senior, future tech lead, principal engineer, staff engineer, engineering manager. Doesn't matter what you're going to be. That perspective is absolutely vital. And so what you usually do in order to mitigate this problem that you cannot possibly find people who know exactly your stack, even though, as I said, even if you have like the exact tools and stuff like that, it's very difficult. So what will you do? You will get people who are close enough with the aptitude and the potential to adopt that which is specific to your organization. And this is one of the reasons why I tell people that even if you hire like a new senior or something like that, you will need some idea of an onboarding process, because even I can speak for myself, guys, even today, after, well, I don't even know how many years it is now, I will go to a new company and I know what I need to ask for. I know exactly how my first day needs to look. So I might be a little bit ahead of the curve when it comes to figuring out where the code is, how everything is structured, how I started, and stuff like that. But even with that knowledge that is generic to whatever stack I'm dealing with, I will not know if you have some specific requirements before you release. If there's something that is specific to your organization, a ritual or access rights, that's a big one, like getting access to various systems and stuff like that, or knowing where the credentials are, API secrets, or whatever you might have, right? These things I have no idea about. And so those things you have to learn on the job, and every single job that you take will have the same thing. So if you are just close enough, then usually you will be considered. And close enough, what does close enough mean? Well, it very much depends on the organization. I'm very sorry to say that I can't help you there, because in some cases, like a classic one is like if you think in terms of close enough. So if you are, say, if you're a front-end developer and you know Angular, then the average, depending on if you can like sort of showcase that you know all the surrounding stuff like CSS, HTML, and you have a good understanding of stuff like that, a lot of companies will consider you for a React position or a Vue position or something like that, because in their minds, which I think is a little bit weird, but there you go, that is close enough. Same thing is for the backend developers, with between, say, Java and C#, or Ruby and Python and things like that, where people who have been around the block a little bit, like they know that these things are close enough. There's like so much overlapping that the leap from one thing to the other might not necessarily be as tricky as you might imagine. And so they're a little bit more lenient with the fact that you might not have worked with that specific language. Same thing goes for, if you're doing CSS or a specific database or whatever. Like it really is like a luck of the draw here, guys. You can't know what specific job posting and what specific company is going to feel is flexible and negotiable, and what's going to be hard requirements. The main thing I usually tell people is that it's good to have a little bit of a width to your profile, so you know like the common stuff for, say, back-end development and so forth. And that's why it's really great if you get some friends or some connections in some companies, and you don't have to be buddies per se, just sort of ask them what they're using. Because I argue that in order for you to understand how to get jobs effectively as a software developer and so forth, you have to position your CV in such a way that it is applicable for the region where you are looking for work. Because in one part of the world, you might be in a lot of demand because you have exactly the right stack on your like in your tool belt, but in another region or somewhere else or another company and so forth, you might be completely out of touch because they're doing something in a vastly different way. I've seen this quite a lot with people who work for many years in one specific stack, and they do like what I call sort of trivial work that doesn't really reflect what most of the industry is doing. And although they have a lot of experience, it doesn't matter, because they have not learned how to be a real professional. And like that's hard in the beginning, but for example, like when you get to my skill level, or like people who are better than me, usually the language and the tools, it's just a formality. We've been doing this stuff for so long that, I mean, if you tell me you're gonna have to throw something like F# maybe, or Haskell at me for me to go, all right, I might have to sit down and study a little bit before I take this job. Because I mean, honestly, guys, if I can pick up Scala, I feel like I feel fairly confident that you're gonna have to get really tricky with me for me to be able to not figure out how to work in a specific stack. There are more complicated stacks than Scala and so forth, but I've done the same journey with Python, PHP, C#, etc. I mean, the list goes on. I'm a little bit of a freak here, but like I hope that a lot of seniors can relate to the idea that once you learned programming in one or two languages, you start to see the commonalities. You start to really almost get a sixth sense for how to write things. You might not be as productive as you would be in your favorite languages, but as I like to say, it's a little bit like driving somebody else's car. Sure, you're probably not going to feel as comfortable in that thing as you're in your own car. You might like get some gears wrong or something like that, but you're going to be able to get to your destination. So what I want you to take away from this is that people learn before and during the job. So your profile, and this is the key tip I usually give people, if you want to be the sort of person who can get hired at any job or like do anything and so forth, make sure that you plan accordingly when you're like, because the inclination for a lot of people is to get the first job, learn how to do that job until you're no longer scared shitless of getting fired, and then that's it. now you go over to watching TV or like breeding, I suppose, whatever else other people are doing, right? And that's fine, you can do those sorts of things, right? But if you want to have a really high market value, you have to be a little bit in touch with the range of tools that you have in your region. Because imagine if you get really good at just one stack and you really don't have enough of a holistic and mature way and experience basically in order to transition from that stack to another one, or to handle something like a slight difference in workflow. And I see this, guys, I see this a lot. I'm not going to talk specifically which regions I usually see it from, but there are regions of the world, guys, where if I hire a person from that region and the tools that they know is not exactly the stuff that they have been doing, I'm fucked. And basically, basically can just throw. I can't get this person because they are literally only learning exactly the things they know in order to keep the job. And as I said, that can work, but it's not a sustainable thing if you want to be able to be a little bit flexible. And it's definitely something that's going to be picked up. And you don't want to be one of those people that I meet after, they've been working for 10, 20 years or something like that. And I realized that, yeah, you've worked for 20 years and you can only work in the job that you have right now, probably, because nobody else is going to be like have like an identical stack to yours, and you lack the mature understanding of like how the internet works and how all your tools are working in like modern practice and stuff like that. You're so out of touch that I can't feel comfortable in that you will adopt these new tools. And that's this balance that you have to strike. Some tools you will learn from having the right role. That's how I have done it. Like I've jumped around and like found other places of work where they do things are slightly different and so forth. So you get a range of things, and now I can do a lot of various things. I'm not an expert in everything, of course, but I do have a range to myself. And some of it I learned in school or in my free time and so forth and so forth. So I try to find that balance. The main thing isn't so much if you do it at work. That's the best thing, of course, because that's basically paid. You're getting paid and you will probably get better at it than if you do it in your free time. The main thing is that you figure out the range of stuff that you could like that is most relevant for whatever roles you're looking for in your region, and get those down. Once you have that, yeah, then it's probably going to be pretty easy for you to jump around, because then you've reached, as I said, the good enough state or close enough state where even if it's not exactly the thing you've been doing, it's close enough that most people will go, yeah, they're probably going to pick it up. Have a great day.